I'm letting Scarlett Miller use the house until the kids finish high school. Mr. Miller will stay on as the mortgage and utility payer. She'll also get half the value of her husband's business. Miss Miller will keep her vehicle, and Mr. Miller will keep covering the payments. Plus, Mrs. Miller will get 60% of all assets, including bank accounts, investments, and retirement funds. Mrs. Miller gets primary custody of the kids, and Mr. Miller gets visitation rights every other weekend and 2 consecutive weeks in the summer. Child support will be $750 per kid, for a total of $1. I'm also giving her $2,000 a month in maintenance because she hasn't worked outside the home for the last 5 years. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days unless Mr. Miller withdraws his petition with that judge. Chloe Wilson slammed the gavel, signaling the end of the proceedings just as she was rising from her seat. I spoke the word that would completely reshape the months ahead of my life. Judge Wilson froze mid-motion, her head whipping around so fast I half expected to hear it snap. Her expression was a blend of shock and disbelief, as though she couldn't comprehend that someone had dared. She slowly sank back into her chair, her eyes narrowing into a glare so cold it could have frozen fire. The anger radiating off her was palpable. "Excuse me," she spat. "Do you not understand the word no?" I replied nonchalantly. "I can define it for you if you'd like." Her eyes flared. "I'm not stupid. I know what's happening here. Frankly, I couldn't care less." "I've been waiting for this moment," I said. "You have exactly 1 minute to apologize or I'll hold you in contempt of court." She warned, her voice icy. "Well, that'll be the first ruling you've gotten right today. This whole process is a joke." My lawyer was hissing frantically into my ear, shuffling through his briefcase like he was searching for something to tape my mouth shut. "In that case," she said with a sneer, 30 days in jail for contempt." I chuckled. Looks like we're in Australia now, with all these kangaroos hopping around this courtroom. My lawyer was nearly shouting at me to shut up, his hand inching toward mine. The judge shot back, her temper flaring even more. I gave her a deadpan stare. "You know you're dishonorable." I paused, raising my right hand and flipping her off. "You can shove this right where the sun doesn't shine." I extended my other hand, flipping her off with both fingers. "Now, as for the other, it's for your tight, constipated you-know-what. Maybe then you'd be less of a bitter man." I was so angry at the judge. I thought she was going to explode. Her face turned a shade of red I didn't think was humanly possible. If looks could kill, I'd have been vaporized right there on the spot. She sentenced me to 90 days. She growled, her voice sounding downright demonic. Luckily for my lawyer, that's when my BFF stepped in and took hold of me. He looked pitiful. I almost felt bad for him. Everyone in the courtroom was shocked when I couldn't contain myself and burst out laughing. That probably explains why the psychologists visited me during my time in lockup over the next couple of weeks. The letter from my lawyer's firm dropping me as a client arrived the next day. It wasn't a shocker. You might be wondering what led up to all of that, so let me give you a little context. My name's Theo Miller. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a nice, middle-class family in the heartland of America. I was raised with strong traditional values, knowing right from wrong, respecting those who earned it, and never cheating. Promise meant something. You worked hard, shared what you had, and stuck to your principles. The golden rule, treat others as you'd want to be treated, was important to me. Of course, there's a flip side to that. Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. People can be pretty tricky, and I've always been pretty stubborn. I've had people say that my whole life. I have a strong sense of justice, so if someone wronged me, things could get ugly fast. I decided to do something about it. Take high school, for example. I was dating Hannah Evans. We'd been together for a couple of months when we had an argument. I don't even remember what it was about. After a few months, we had an argument. I don't even remember what it was about. We exchanged words and broke up. I put that in quotes because we both knew it wasn't permanent. We'd cool off over the weekend and get back together like we always did. Then Saturday night came around. I was walking by the theater when I saw my cousin Rowan taking Hannah inside. There are two things I should fill you in on. Rowan and I were like brothers growing up. We were the same age and lived just down the block. We were practically inseparable. Second, I knew he liked Hannah too. He knew we'd broken up, but he also knew we'd probably get back together after the weekend. He just didn't care. That's something you don't do from that point on. He was dead to me. When Hannah tried to talk to me on Monday, I completely ignored her. On Sunday at church, I didn't even look at her. He tried to explain himself, but I just stared at him, said nothing, and walked away when his family came over for Sunday dinner. I ignored him again, even when he tried to play video games with me. I just quit and went to my room. Our parents made several attempts to patch things up between us, but I refused every single time. Even a year later, when I stole his girlfriend, I still wouldn't speak to him. And when he confronted me about it, I told him where to go. Years later, he sent me an invitation to his wedding, but I ignored it. When I got married to Scarlett, everyone in the extended family was invited except him. So, I can hold a grudge, and I won't deny it. If someone wrongs me, I don't forgive unless it was an honest mistake. Rowan and Hannah knew exactly what they were doing. Some of you might think I'm being unfair, but I don't care. If that's the case, I'll make sure to piss you off even more. I firmly believe in facing the consequences of your actions. Don't do the crime if you can't handle the punishment. If you drive drunk and get caught, you lose your license, pay higher insurance, and serve your community service. It's as simple as that. If your job it depends on how you drive, you lose your job. Call it the stupid tax. If a girl decides to sleep around without protection and ends up pregnant at 18, her stupid tax is motherhood for the next 18 years. Likewise, if a guy knocks up his prom date, he's on the hook to man up and take care of the child. Actions have consequences. I believe in personal responsibility. I'm not paying for someone else's mistakes. I worked hard in high school, kept my grades up, and earned some solid scholarships. I got into college, did okay with the ladies, and still managed to keep my academics on track. I was decent looking, stayed in shape, and women seemed to notice. I got into a few fights because of my beliefs, but I won more than I lost. I graduated with a degree in economics and a minor in accounting, then I went on to earn my MBA and landed a good-paying job at a big company. Being single and having few bills to worry about, I started playing around. I discovered I had a talent for the stock market and did pretty well. A few months into the job, I met Scarlett at a party. We hit it off and I asked her out. She said yes, and things just took off from there. I have to admit she's stunning. I laugh when I think about that. Who doesn't call their girlfriend beautiful? She's beautiful, no doubt about it. I'm sure there are people out there who don't see it that way, but to me, Scarlett is stunning. She really is gorgeous. Heads turn when we go out, and my friends constantly joke about trying to swoop in if we ever break up. Some of my lesbian friends have even mentioned that they'd try to turn her if the chance ever came. Eventually, I proposed. She said yes, and we got married. Scarlett went to college too, though I like to joke that she went for her Ms. degree. She didn't land that one, but she did graduate with a degree in art history, which qualified her to work as a barista at Starbucks. For those unfamiliar, and Ms. degree is what you call it when a girl goes, I know I'm an arrogant jerk, but I did go to college just to put off real life and graduate with a husband to support me. We settled into married life smoothly a week before the wedding. Scarlett quit her job and embraced her new role as Susie Homemaker. Our sex life was fantastic, and we bought ourselves a nice 3-in-the-bedroom house. I was killing it at work and making great money in the stock market. We weren't living extravagantly, so we saved a good amount every bonus. I invested all of my bonuses and maxed out my 401k contributions. My goal was to retire before I turned 40 and live the good life. I was damn good at what I did, and my company rewarded me with generous bonuses. I was promoted a few times and moving up the corporate ladder pretty quickly. A few years into our marriage, I came home from work one Friday to find Scarlett all dressed up, grinning from ear to ear. "Hurry up and get showered and changed. We're celebrating tonight," she said. "Daddy," she added, which caught me off guard. We had been trying for a few months, but hearing her say it, I was caught off guard when she said it out loud. I grabbed her and spun her around, planting kisses all over her face. Since we figured our wild nights out would be on hold for a while with the pregnancy and baby on the way, we made the most of that night and hit the town. The next few months were filled with joy as we prepared for our new addition. Then, another surprise came: twins. I was already over the moon, picturing our two little girls as Daddy's girls. Life couldn't get any better when the day finally arrived. We rushed to the hospital a few hours later, and our beautiful, healthy twin daughters were born. They had all their fingers and toes and were perfect. They had to stay in the hospital for a couple of extra days since they were twins, but everything was fine when we brought them home. Both sides of the family were there to greet us, and everyone was thrilled. My mom was especially excited. Her eyes were off them. She'd been waiting for grandkids for so long, and now they were finally here. Life changed fast. I realized that working at the big company was taking too much time away from my family. I had a nice pot of money saved, so I decided to start my own company. I'd been doing well with my investments, so I got licensed and opened my own investment firm. A few friends and family members I'd already been helping came on board as official clients, and that got the ball rolling. Within a year, I had a solid client list, and word was spreading. Colleagues started moving their portfolios to me, and their friends were doing the same. When you're on top, the only way left to go is down. It was the girl's second birthday, and we went all out. It was a massive party, even though they wouldn't remember it. We filmed everything so they could enjoy it when they were older. Both sides of the family were there, and everyone was having a great time. I had just stepped out of the bedroom after using the other bathroom because the hall one was occupied. I overheard my mom talking to her sister in the hallway. I still don't know where those blue eyes came from. My mom said, "Have you asked Michael about it?" My aunt replied, "Oh no. I can't imagine what would happen if he found out they aren't his. He's so happy. It would probably destroy him." I couldn't listen to any more. I retraced my steps and locked myself in the bathroom. My mind was racing. They had to be mine, right? Surely someone in the family had blue eyes. I went through mental snapshots of everyone. My eyes were a dull brown. Scarlett's were hazel. The only family member I could think of with my cousin Mary had green eyes, not brown like me. I thought about Scarlett's family next. No one had blue eyes there either. I stayed in the bathroom for a while trying to calm myself down. Eventually, I managed to pull it together enough to rejoin the party without raising any suspicions. It was tough, but I played the part everyone expected. All the while, I was thinking about what I was going to do later that evening. After everyone had left and we put the girls to bed, I studied their faces closely. I saw features that clearly came from Scarlett, but there were others I didn't recognize. None of them looked like they came from me. The next day, while Scarlett napped with the girls, I got on my computer and ordered some supplies from my office using a company credit card so she wouldn't see the invoice. I also researched local private investigation firms. The suspicion that Scarlett might have cheated on me nearly 3 years ago was growing stronger by the minute. If she had, who's to say she wasn't still doing it? I needed proof. A few days later, my supplies arrived. And I had also hired a firm called Pro Investigations. I gave them all the information they needed to access Scarlett's phone, tablet, and laptop at the same time. I began making some financial moves. If it turned out she hadn't cheated and the girls were mine, it wouldn't matter. But if what I suspected was true, then those moves would put all the money out of her reach. I wasn't about to pay for her fun on the side, and I sure as hell wasn't going to support someone else's kids. Yeah, the girls were innocent in all of this, but so was I. Have sex with someone else and get pregnant. Then let him pay. Plans weren't set in stone, but there was a feeling of anticipation. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my office. I made sure the door was closed and locked. I opened it and cried for an hour. The kids weren't mine, but I had a feeling this was true. The next day, my private investigator met with me. He had proof. The man was her personal trainer. He was blonde, he had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she saw him several times a week. She even took our daughters to his apartment so he could spend time with his biological children. Audio recordings confirmed that they both acknowledged the true paternity. I knew what lay ahead, so I scheduled a meeting with a divorce lawyer the next afternoon. I was no fool. I braced myself for a legal battle that I was left with little dignity or compensation. The lawyer offered his counsel, which I promptly rebuffed. He detailed the legal ramifications, but I countered with my own terms. He emphasized the priority of the children's welfare, to which I agreed. They could be cared for by their mother and her partner without any involvement from me or my finances. I laid out my conditions and departed. My lawyer he started to question his decision to take me on as a client. I'd actually told him to draft the documents, but to hold off on filing them until I gave the go-ahead. My feigned intention to reconcile might have misled him. I'll admit I lied about that. It took 2 months for everything to be discreetly finalized. My wife was blissfully unaware of any brewing conflict. The drama class I took in my junior year really came in handy. I had no income or assets, except for an encumbered house and an old Chevy pickup. The house had a heavy mortgage because it was refinanced for improvements. It wouldn't even cover the brokerage fees if it were sold. I drove a Lexus, but the house was company property, not mine. I had $10,000 stashed away. I had $10,000 in cash to tide me over for the next few months. When my cousin Owen and his wife Hannah came to visit, Scarlett was surprised. I told her that Owen and Hannah had come to my office a few weeks earlier. After some honest conversations, they admitted their past mistakes and apologized. I chose to forgive them. People can be easily misled. Owen and Hannah came to my office last week, and they apologized. Yes, that's true. I pride myself on honesty. I did forgive them and welcome them back into my life. However, a few minor and coincidental details may have been overlooked. Hannah's family includes several members who are, shall we say, comfortable skirting minor legal boundaries. Some are rather imposing figures and have no qualms about involving themselves in an occasional bar brawl. I don't indulge in rumors, but I've heard whispers about 4 or 5 of them. Some say they work as enforcers for local businessmen with less than stellar reputations. Of course, that's just speculation by people who like to gossip. It's not relevant to this story. Before Owen and Hannah visited, a news story reported that a local gym personal trainer was mugged after work. He tried to fight off 5 assailants and ended up losing his wallet, car, and clothes. He was badly beaten and ended up in the hospital for several weeks. The police really need to address the rising crime in our area. The local crime situation is getting worse, and the police can't seem to find any suspects because the culprits wore dark clothing, gloves, and ski masks. The doctor said that, despite needing reconstructive facial surgery and extensive physical therapy, the blonde-haired blue the victim was expected to recover, but it was unlikely he'd ever regain full sexual function. Scarlett seemed unusually glum and withdrawn for about a week after the mugging. I assumed she was anxious about the area's rising crime, so I offered to enhance our home security, but it didn't ease her worries. Come Monday morning, I contacted my lawyer to finalize and file the divorce paperwork. I insisted that Scarlett be served by late Friday afternoon. Despite his attempts to sway my decision, I stood my ground by Tuesday. The documents were ready for my signature. I met with Signature to wrap everything up. He warned me against my chosen path, but I decided to humor him. I handed over the house and the investments. The investment accounts were empty. I had no problem giving her 100% of nothing. The responsibility for the mortgage and utilities was solely hers. Scarlett didn't know that I had been moving my tools and belongings out of the garage. I relocated most items from my home office, tools, and larger possessions to Owen and Hannah's ranch. I moved smaller, less valuable items to a one-bedroom apartment. On Friday morning, I finally got to move into my new bedroom apartment, which is owned by an offshore LLC. I went to work as usual earlier in the week. Owen helped me move my truck to the office after dropping off my car. I drove the pickup to the bank, where I withdrew almost everything, leaving only $100 in the accounts and emptying the safety deposit box. I took everything to the ranch, knowing I couldn't risk the accounts being discovered or easily tracked. I trusted Owen and Hannah because despite our past problems, family bonds were strong. We had a collective sense of contentment when Owen and I reconciled. I returned home late that morning, parking a few blocks away to check the GPS tracker. I'd put a note on Scarlett's car saying she was at the mall, just as I thought. I quickly parked in the driveway and got the last of my clothes and belongings, which I'd packed in the garage over the previous few days. I threw everything into the truck and emptied my closet and dresser, carrying clothes on hangers by the armful. I didn't bother closing the garage. As I left, my phone rang. It was Scarlett, likely trying to use her non-functional credit card and checking the GPS. I saw she was heading toward the house, so I laughed, left my phone on the table, and walked out. Minutes later, I was blocks away at my new apartment. I quickly unloaded everything into the appropriate rooms and enjoyed 3 beers once everything was in place. I'd just settled into my recliner when my new cell phone rang. Only a few people had this number, and Scarlett wasn't one. I answered, and she said she'd been served. She'd have the video shortly. The voice informed me, and I replied, ending the call. 15 minutes later, I received the footage via email. Scarlett's shock was unmistakable. The video captured her until she collapsed to the floor. The server made sure she was okay and then left with the footage, ending shortly thereafter. I was curious about her reaction upon digesting the divorce petition and the included DNA and video proof of her infidelity. From that moment on, things moved slowly. I got several calls, including multiple attempts from my old office, as Scarlett sought to reach me. She wouldn't believe I'd resigned 2 weeks ago. When she finally came to the office, it was a bit of a mess and we had to call the police to get her off the premises. Owen called me a couple of times to say that Scarlett was trying to track me down. She probably figured out that Owen's sudden appearance was connected to our divorce. Restraining orders were issued for both Owen and my former company, which forced her to back off. It took 2 weeks before my lawyer reached out to her, asking about her legal representation. She hadn't yet secured a lawyer. Her funds were dwindling rapidly. She had little more than the cash in her purse and the $200 I left in our accounts. The financial strain was meanwhile, I was taking it easy, avoiding new projects to make sure there was nothing left for her to claim. Eventually, Scarlett hired a lawyer, and meetings were arranged. I refused to attend, choosing instead to relay my instructions to my lawyer. I wouldn't be giving her a single penny more. It seems tempers flared during those discussions. It ended up going to arbitration, and I was needed there, but things quickly went south. She demanded all the money, and I told her we didn't have any. We're flat broke. I'm living in the cheapest single-bedroom apartment I could find. I explained that the place was affordable because I knew the actual owner of the complex. She said my investments and savings were gone. She accused me of making a bad investment. She said I lost it all by investing in a cheating wife account. I responded that I had lost the cash, which was now shuffled through obscure offshore banks. She said she would give me the house with her name on the title. My lawyer interjected that I could have sounded more assertive, but instead it was like someone inspecting ruins. Post-tornado, remarking that at least the rubble hadn't caught fire, I'm mortgage-free. I can't afford the payments. Scarlett shouted, and things spiraled from there. He could have sounded more assertive, but instead it was like someone inspecting ruins. Post-tornado, remarking that at least the rubble hadn't caught fire, I'm mortgage-free. I can't afford the payments. Scarlett, she started shouting and things quickly got out of control. She's demanding child support, but she's not my kid's mother. She's also asking for spousal maintenance, but I don't have an income. She's looking for 70% of the liquid assets, but there's nothing to find. She's also demanding 50% of the business, but that's not going to happen. She wants 50% of the retirement, but I lost that too. The arbitration didn't work out, so now we're in court. The hearing took place under the watchful eye of Judge Chloe Wilson, who is known for her bias against men, especially those whose wives had cheated. If the roles had been reversed, her retribution would have been legendary. Of course, I didn't have high hopes. You might think I was naive in thinking I could convince them of our financial destitution, but I was fully prepared for them to examine. I needed to show that I had assets from a few months ago. The next step was to make sure they couldn't access what I'd hidden. I had to transfer funds across different banks and accounts. Sometimes I took money out of one bank and put it into multiple accounts with different names. Hannah's family ran a questionable business. Gag gift operation specializing in entertainment purposes only. I even had one fake ID that said I was Jesus Christ. It was always funny when a victim said Jesus Christ and I showed them the ID. The quality was impressive, but the entertainment label hinted at inauthenticity. They usually sold for about $50, but for a bit more, they conveniently omitted the I, then electronically moved the money into different accounts, creating a trail that would be costly and time-consuming to trace, potentially taking months or even years for anyone to catch up. I planned to be long gone by the time they caught up with me. I stood before the unsympathetic judge again. My 60 days were almost up in county jail, leaving me with 30 days of a 90-day sentence. You got a day in jail, so have you learned your lesson yet? You mean the lesson about not marrying a feeding spouse? I mastered that lesson long before I was in your courtroom. I meant regarding your attitude in my court, she continued, her forehead veins throbbing with growing irritation. Can't say there was much wrong with my attitude while I was being railroaded here. I replied coolly, her escalating anger becoming more and more obvious that I'm concerned about your blood pressure. You know, I can extend your sentence. Don't you think I should? I'm adding another 30 days. Where is your lawyer? And why haven't you made any child support or maintenance payments? She demanded it. It seemed like I had overestimated the intellect required to serve as a judge. Maybe I should break it down for you in simple terms. I'm in jail with no money. I don't have access to make payments. I was in a tough spot because of your decision, and I ended up back in jail with no money. So, I couldn't make the payments. I was taken back to my cell. Now, with an additional 90 days added on, I have to serve 30 days for each confrontation. Life in jail was bearable. The food was lacking, but I ate it anyway. I had a bed to sleep on and plenty of time to relax and exercise my antics in the courtroom. My actions in the courtroom earned me some notoriety and allies, plus Hannah's family. Even though there was only one hiccup, my connections proved useful. One of Scarlett's cousins, who wasn't as savvy as he should have been, thought he'd get himself jailed to teach me a lesson. Everyone already knew who he was and what he was up to before he even crossed the yard. Various accidents befell him. There was an errant football and an unfortunately timed basketball pass. All of these were purely coincidental mishaps. They determined that he continued his approach just as he was ready to take a sucker punch. I turned and he got a good kick to the stomach, which stopped him in his tracks. After that, he spent some time in the infirmary and then locked himself in his cell until he was released. I ended up back in front of the judge, who was still pretty strict. I was ready to apologize for my actions. She asked if I had done anything inappropriate. I said I didn't think so. She said I should be nicer and get out of there faster. The judge will be presiding, and you're really getting on my nerves. Should I start stomping my feet? I think it would be a good idea to recommend that men have EMTs on standby for a potential stroke. Not a single child support or maintenance payment has been made, nor has the mortgage or utilities. She said, I believe we've covered this. Jail limits my income and abilities. Secondly, the kids aren't mine, so there's no obligation for me to support them. After the business windfall you gave her, Your Honor. Mr. Miller sold his business to an overseas firm 2 months before filing for divorce. We haven't identified the owners for compliance with the court order. Then, an elegant woman stood up and asked to speak with Your Honor. I represent the purchasing firm's board. I move to dismiss any ruling awarding Mrs. Miller ownership of the business wasn't involved in this case, and the transaction happened before the divorce filing. That means Mrs. Miller can't claim ownership. But what about the money from the sale? Scarlett said the transfer and payments happened overseas. The representative said, I don't know the details, but the money from the sale has never entered U.S. territory. That means it's outside U.S. jurisdiction. Any claims would need to be addressed with your ex. So, the money might be in a country where my husband is, but I don't know which one. Scarlett's lawyer asked if the money had moved to another country. I don't know where it is now, she replied. My client is in a tough spot. The mortgage hasn't been paid for 3 months, which is pushing the house toward foreclosure. The utilities are on the verge of being cut off. Her parents, who initially helped, are now stretched thin. She found work as a waitress, but it's not enough to maintain the house. The judge fixed her gaze. Mr. Miller, you have 1 week to catch up on the payments. I can't just pull cash out of thin air. As I've said, I'm physically unable to comply. I'm incarcerated with no money access. Your decisions prevent me from earning any cash. You regularly check my cell. You demand payments, but you don't offer a way for me to make them. I'm telling you, Mr. Miller, that she can access your accounts and transfer the funds. I don't have a lawyer anymore, and I don't know what accounts you're talking about. I've told you I'm broke, but you don't believe me. You're not willing to accept that these accounts might exist. How would I possibly remember the access information without my financial records? It doesn't matter because there aren't any accounts if you believe otherwise. Please show me the account details. The judge asked about my checking, savings, and investments. As I explained, a series of poor investment choices wiped them out. The proceeds from my company sale also contributed to this. The company struggled due to those investments. I sold it cheaply and used the proceeds to settle expenses. There's no money remaining. Mr. Miller, do you expect this court to believe that I shrugged? I don't care if you don't believe me. Just show me the account info that proves I have the money you say I do. My guess is that she's trying to blame me for her financial losses while she's having an affair. That doesn't make sense. Scarlett's lawyer said it was as logical as imprisoning me without money access. Demanding payments nonetheless, I replied. The judge leaned forward with a steely tone. Mr. Miller, I can keep you in jail until you pay. I looked at her incredulously, sure that would make it feasible to comply with her demands. 3 months passed, and the house was foreclosed. Scarlett lost her Lexus due to non-payment. She moved in with her parents because she couldn't afford an apartment for herself and the kids. She worked part-time. At a diner, they asked the judge to let me out so I could start paying them back. Her lover had been released, but he was in debt and in trouble financially. His credit was too bad to get new cards. I got a lawyer who negotiated my release so I could find a job and start making money. I was under surveillance and without my passport, and they thought I was stashing money and trying to flee. I started working at a local Taco Bell and living at Owen and Hannah's ranch. I knew they were watching me from the road, but I didn't realize that most of the cash was already in my possession. Over the next 3 months, I worked at Taco Bell, where Scarlett managed to garnish my wages via a court order. Since I was earning minimum wage, she wasn't receiving much during this time. I made plans to leave town. Owen had cleared out my apartment while I was incarcerated and distributed its contents among my extended family. Recently, several packages from my family were shipped to the same destination. Hannah's family visited frequently, and we hosted barbecues with my relatives, all of which went undetected by the surveillance. Visitors would discreetly collect packages from the backyard sheds and transport them in their vehicles, which were then repackaged and sent it away over the next few weeks. I spent my days working or at home, never venturing out. Eventually, Taco Bell sought a restraining order against Scarlett, who regularly disrupted the restaurant, demanding money. My manager ensured I kept my job and met with my new lawyer. All of this was happening at the ranch. I hadn't mentioned her yet because I hadn't told her about the company that purchased my firm in court. After that, I hired her. This lawyer was a force to be reckoned with, a real shark, or perhaps a barracuda. She was sleek, tenacious, and had a surprising appetite for spontaneous poolside encounters. Some people think it's unethical for a lawyer to have a personal relationship with a client. But to some lawyers, ethics are optional. They see scruples as foreign currency and morals as large wall art. Now, about the funds. I did sell my firm, but not to myself. I made sure Scarlett had no chance. If she wanted to claim any of it, she'd have to sell it outright for cash or conduct the sale overseas. That way, the money would be untouchable by U.S. laws. The only way she could claim any was if I moved it into a U.S. bank account. That wasn't going to happen. It was a substantial sum. My overseas accounts held $10 million with $200. I had $10 million in cash from bank accounts and safes by then. I'd set aside most of it for my plans, leaving $150,000. I had $150,000 on hand, but none of my family was going to accompany me on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. We hosted another family barbecue, and Owen and I had everything ready to go. Stella, my lawyer, showed up later. Hannah's uncle thanked me for helping out and handed me an envelope, which I passed to Stella for safekeeping that evening. Owen and Hannah now owned their ranch outright. The lender confirmed the mortgage was paid off, which led to a huge celebration. We had a great time as the night went on. Stella was preparing to leave with other guests. Her flight was scheduled for an airport in the neighboring state. She had packed earlier. She left for the airport without stopping by her apartment. Nobody noticed a man getting out of her car in the parking garage, nor the man walking behind her to the international terminal. Theo Miller couldn't leave the country because he didn't have his passport, but Matthew Thompson's went unchallenged in first class on the flight to Mexico City. Nobody Stella Taylor and Victoria Thompson held hands when they arrived, and Stella vanished while Victoria joined Matthew Thompson for a connecting flight to Ecuador. 2 days later, Adam and Hannah Baker reached their Costa Rican home. Amazingly, an old Chevy resembling one missing from Owen and Hannah's ranch awaited them. A bench warrant was issued for Theo Miller, who had stopped making payments when he was summoned. Owen and Hannah's lawyer argued that they were not responsible for his disappearance. They even pursued back rent. Theo simply left one day in his old pickup, while people were still skeptical. There was no evidence to contradict them. In the years that followed, Adam Baker ran a charter fishing service, while Hannah managed their cantina. Their wealth allowed them to live a comfortable life in the village, where they owned one of the more luxurious haciendas. They hosted relatives like Owen and Hannah, and they enjoyed their simple yet fulfilling life, embraced by the community. Their generosity left a lasting impact. Adam was always there to help whenever anyone needed it. He played the stock market when he wasn't working on his boat or managing the cantina. He even set up investment accounts for locals and offered them financial guidance. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard the news about the infamous Judge Chloe Wilson years after she'd settled. In Costa Rica, Judge Wilson was known for her disdainful demeanor. She was caught in her own scandal when it was discovered that she was cheating on her wife with a man who had adopted her wife's 3 children. As a result, Judge Wilson found herself responsible for child support and mortgage payments for her ex-wife. To make matters worse, the ex-wife soon moved her boyfriend into the house, flaunting their relationship publicly as if they were married. They never made it official, but rumor has it that they finally set a wedding date, which was strategically planned for just a week after their youngest son graduates from college. Coincidentally, this timing aligns perfectly with the cessation of Judge Wilson's financial obligations, which extend until her ex. The timing is quite interesting, isn't it? I hope it touched your heart. If you enjoyed it, Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a fresh story every day. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so feel free to share your experiences and tell your story.